I've got a poll that I
You
was,
love a poll. You
and
love a
I love a
poll. You love
poll.
an
I love a
icebreaker.
poll.
Yeah.
Right, we're on time, so I'm going to press start.
Go for it.
Get going. Right, welcome everybody. I'm going to give people a few seconds to sign on, and then we'll make a start. Hopefully you can all see and hear me. There is a chat button at on the menu at the bottom. I think I've enabled the chat this time. So if you guys can hear me and everything looks okay, if you could just drop a message, thank you, in the chat, or a thumbs up. That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Welcome everybody. We've got a great session planned for you this evening. Thanks so much for tuning in. I know you guys are going to find this really helpful. This is the second of these sessions that that Ronnie and I have done. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mary. I work for Harrier. I'm the brand development manager. We've got Kate joining us, and I'm going to be handing over to our guest speaker, Ronnie, very shortly. So I've checked that you can all hear me, so that's brilliant. I'm not anticipating any technical hitches, but if anything does happen, please bear with us and we'll try to sort it out as soon as possible. I know the last talk we did have a few issues with internet, but we did get Ronnie back on. So yeah, we'll persevere with that. Can I ask that if at any point during the talk, if you guys have any questions, there is a Q&A button at the bottom. If you could drop your questions in the Q&A and then just leave the chat for talk amongst the guests. But if you've got a specific question for Ronnie, please drop it in there and we'll get to it. So I think that's about it for housekeeping. I have got some polls for you guys. So I've got the first one. We have just started, well, my club's just started cross-country season, so I want to know which cross-country runner are you? We've got a great picture there. Hopefully you guys can see it, from one of our Harriers. So we've got the mud lover, the one in shorts and a vest, no matter how cold it is, the one who forgets that they've got one more lap to run before they finish, and the one who always gets lost. Which one are you, Ronnie?
Yeah, I don't really know what I'm doing, so I'd probably think I've finished and I've got another lap. Yeah. I don't know what day it is, so yeah, I struggle on laps.
Right, I'm going to end this now and I'll share the results. It's a bit split, actually, but I think unsurprisingly, most people are mud lovers, and I think you have to be, really, to run cross country. It's all part of the fun, so that's brilliant. I'll stop sharing that now. If you guys are new to Harrier, or if you've been wearing our kit for a little while, I just wanted to say thanks so much for your support. This session forms part of our How to Run 100 Miles pack. And module 3 is going to be published any day now. And we just want to say thanks to Ronnie and also to Dan Summers for lending their expertise for the pack. If you've not had a chance to have a look at it yet, it's on our website under Help and How to Run 100 Miles. And I have to say, it's not just for 100 milers. If you're running an ultra of any distance, you're going to find some really valuable information there. So do check it out. I've got another poll.
You do really love a poll, don't you?
I do. So this one is about your running goals. So Ronnie's going to be talking to us in a little bit about setting your goals. And this is how have you set most of your running goals to date? Would you say that's through personal development, so you're wanting to progress, or are you a social runner? Do you tend to pick the races that your friends pick? maybe you've had a DNF in a previous race, you've got unfinished business and you want to go back and try it again. Or I think if it were me choosing on this list, it's on a whim. You like the look of a race and you think, sure, I'll have a go at it. Not really thinking if it's suitable for me as a person or my abilities. So I'll give everybody a few more seconds to answer, and then we'll end that. It's a bit split, but most people doing for personal development, and then we've got on a whim. So would you say that's about what you expected, Ronnie?
No, I thought it'd be more on a whim, to be honest, or more social runners. But yeah, no, that's what we want. But it makes sense, doesn't it? Because these kind of people have turned up to this webinar. So it makes sense that there are people wanting to invest in themselves and personally develop. So yeah, we should have predicted that.
Brilliant. So the last time, I know we were chatting a bit before, the last time we were talking about positive running, I was in a cabin in Minnesota visiting my mum, and that was in May. And then, of course, a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about race reflection because you just finished King Offa's Dyke. So how are you getting on now, Ronnie? Are you fully recovered? You got another race in the calendar?
I don't think I'm ever fully recovered from anything, but yeah, I'm getting there. My shin doesn't hurt like it did, which is great, and I'm back running. I'm starting to feel a bit more healthy, so that's good. Just got to decide whether I do Centurion's Autumn 100, not this weekend, next weekend. There's a long run out because I'm training for the Viking Way in December, so that's 147 miles. So I'm a bit split on it. I might just go and try and jog that 100-mile race in a couple of weeks. So that I always knew if I got healthy, I'd go. I knew I wouldn't be trained as such, but my recovery's been far worse than anticipated because of the bite and the inflammation that I had on my shin. So, but I want to attend. That was one of my goals for this year. If I feel well, I will go, and I'll just rein in my expectations a little bit and just go for that finish.
Brilliant. So that's everything from me. And so I just want to hand over to our guest speaker, Ronnie.
Okay, let's go for it then. So yeah, goal setting and staying positive within those goals is what I'm going to talk about. I've split the talk up into two parts. Hopefully we do get to the latter part of it, and Mary's going to jump in with questions as well throughout the talk. So goal setting first, why set goals, or why pick your main events, your goal events? Lots of benefits. The first thing is it helps you focus in on your training because you've got that deadline. It helps you to work backwards in a reverse calendar to plot out your training. It helps motivation. It gives you that drive, and obviously the fun once you get to the event. There's lots of pitfalls actually to big goals as well. I'm not going to talk about that tonight, but ultimately a goal focuses you, gives you that drive, gives you that determination. I'm going to talk around some of the practicalities, how to match your training to your goal as well. It's worth just stepping out of running just for a second, because sometimes runners do forget this, but we are human beings before runners. So every individual sets goals slightly differently. Some people are just intuitive about their goals and the events that they want to run, and they can follow a 3-step process. They can literally set a goal, plan it out, and then execute it quite well. They're fortunate people, and probably in the minority. Most of us are going to need a lot more help. If you do feel that you struggle setting goals and you struggle setting and picking which events you do want to run, there's a good goal setting method by a guy called Brian Tracy, who uses a 12-step process. So 4 times that 3-step I just mentioned. So it's much more detailed, and that can help prize out of you as the individual the type of goals that you want. But you're never going to beat SMART, and most people are going to have heard of SMART goal setting, and we can use the 100-miler as a great example of that. So if you want to run 100 miles, under that cutoff, you've got your specific goal. So there's the S. Is it measurable? The second letter. Yes, it is, because you can look at your training and see, are you progressing towards that goal? Is it achievable? Well, that's down to the individual. What's your past history? You know, what's your beliefs? What have you been doing within your training? So we can certainly say it's achievable. Is it relevant? You know, if you're really getting into swimming, don't book a 100-mile running race. So is it relevant to your life? Is running becoming a bigger part of your life? Is it time for you to step up to that distance, or any other ultra, of course? You know, does it fit what you're doing now? So 100-mile can definitely be relevant. Is it time bound, the last letter? Yeah, absolutely, because it's got that deadline. So SMART goals work really well: be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. But they also work as a guide throughout that process as well. So to keep on progress, you know, do I believe this is still achievable? Am I prioritizing it and keeping it relevant within my life? Am I on track with the time? So that's a great way to goal set, and hence why most people do know of SMART. However, with all those aforementioned goal setting processes, for me, there's it really lacks something first off. And I've talked a lot about congruent goals. And what I mean by congruent goals is a step before you choose what it is you want to do. So instead of kind of asking, what do I want to do? You ask, who am I? What do I value? What are my passions? Like, what do I want to achieve as an individual? You know, what really drives me? If you find out those answers, then you can look outside and find what might suit you. But if you miss that first stage, for me, you might end up with a good goal, and it might fit into SMART, but it's not the right goal for you. So congruent goal setting is a stage before that, where you really find out a lot of self-inquiry, a lot of self-discovery. What do I actually want? What do I really value? And then you put that into SMART to execute that plan. There's a wonderful quote from Carl Jung, and I may have to paraphrase it because my memory is not all too sharp, but he says something along the lines of, your vision will not become clear until you can look into your own heart. Who look outside dream, who looks within awakes. And that puts it much more eloquently than what I can say it, is that to look inside first, you really find what it is you want. And the ultra game is all consuming. You're going to put a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of dedication into it. It has to be your passion. It has to be, you live it, you know, you've got to love it. And if you don't, you pack it in, that's fine too. But when you're first looking for that first 100-miler, or going beyond that, or that first 50K, try and make sure it's special to you. So whether it's location, whether it's historical, like the King Offa's Dyke I just did, it was fantastic to see King Offa's Dyke, you know, which is an actual thing, and you know, see something ancient like that. Do you value nature? So the environment. Do you want to get in the hills? But think about what it is that really gets you going, and try and match that. And another little checklist that I try and do with my goals, my bigger life goals too, I try and make sure they're intuitive, like they feel right to me, that they're meaningful, that they're authentic, that I've not copied them from anybody else, but they're mine, that they're helpful, hopefully, you know, there's something that I can share with people, incorporate, and they'll develop me as a person. Ultra running, as so many of you just ticked on that poll there, is about personal development as much as it is running. So again, getting that right goal first off is a great thing to do. So I don't know if there's any questions, but I was going to move on to how to focus your training specific to your event, to your goal. Shall I go for it, Mary?
Yeah, go for it. I just had a question about who the quote was from, but I've answered that. So
Carl Jung, yeah, Carl Jung, just an amazing guy. I've read a lot of his stuff. He's no longer with us, but he was I think he was Swiss. I believe he was Swiss, but he was a psychologist, and wrote about very deep archetypal type visions and things, but it's very heavy but very interesting if you want to look into that. So yeah, how do we focus our training towards your goal, towards your event? Well, first off, it's a great idea to always work backwards. So you've got your event date and you look from what time do I have working back to present day. So that's going to be a few months, or it could be for some people years. Some people might have joined late and it's weeks. We always work backwards to get to present day, look at how long you've got. And then you want to look at the stats of your event. What's the ascent? What's the descent? What's the layout of the race like? How often are your aid stations? What do they give you on your aid stations? Can you have pacers? Can you have crew? Really get a lot of information about your event, because that can obviously affect how you're going to prepare, how you're going to train. Also, in terms of what kit is needed, is there a mandatory kit list that you're going to have to get some new kit, running with the right packs? Get your trainers at least, well, be training in your trainers, obviously, but then if you want a new pair, try and get them about 4 weeks before. Just make sure they're the same, they feel good. You don't have to break trainers in, but I would never advise wearing a brand new pair, just because strange things happen with footwear sometimes. But ultimately as well, can you get on similar terrain? So once you've looked at everything about the route, especially I'm talking about 100 milers here, can you get to the route to recce it? That's the holy grail. That's just amazing if you can, but that won't be feasible for everybody. You know, your race might be in America and you're in the UK, for instance. However, can you mimic the terrain? Can you get on similar terrain and do that the best you can? Potentially even the dreaded treadmill as well has its purpose if you can't always get on the right environment, if it's really hilly and very long climb. So that's how, once you've got your goal event, you would look at those key, I know I'm talking generalized here, but you'd look at those key elements and then try, like pieces of a jigsaw, piece that together within your training. And by doing so, you're specifically training. And the closer you get to your event, the more specific your training will get. And you'll be trying to do similar runs or on similar terrain to what you're going to be on. Hopefully all the faster stuff and the strength work's perhaps already done by then, and you're just trying to, you know, simulate what you're going to be doing. Any questions, Mary?
Yes. Someone's asking, how do you apply that for a series of events? So such as doing 10 100-milers in a year. They're saying Robin Hood 100 will be one of them. Well, you have to wait, I guess, till 2024, I guess, because but yeah, how would you apply that for multiple events?
Well, you can't really. This is the whole thing. If you do loads, if you do a lot of events and you do something as mad as, you know, 10 100s in a year, you've got to be honest, you don't really train, you just recover. You just try and recover, try and get a bit of consistency back. Just like I've mentioned, from King Offers to try and get right and healthy to then run another one. It's just a little bit like that, but faster. All you can do is the common sense stuff, is looking at the logistics, where you need to be, the rules of the event. Can you have a pacer, crew, poles, kit? They're the only things that you can really do. Physically, you're going to be smashing yourself on the 100-miler, putting your body in trauma, recovering the best you can, and then smashing yourself again. I don't advise it, obviously, but obviously we're in a strange world, in the ultra world, and people push their limits. But yeah, you certainly can't prepare methodically like you can when you put an main goal event, and work towards that, like most individuals, you know, perhaps should be for their first 100. It should be sat up there on a pedestal, and you should be putting your breakthrough events or your workup events to it. But you've got this main focus of doing that. And yeah, if you've got a lot in your calendar, training and this kind of stuff that I'm talking about kind of goes out the window, and all you're trying to do is get right.
Yeah. Well, Karen's following on from that, asking, how long would you say is a good recovery? That depends on
Absolutely.
how far you've gone, really.
Yeah, it's how far you've gone, but it's down to the individual massively. I don't personally recover very well. What you see as well, and it's worth mentioning this right away, ultra running has a habit of chewing up people and spitting them back out. It's got a high turnover of people. I've been doing this, over 10 years now. I hopefully do it, till my dying day, but that might be quite soon, who knows? But the thing is, you to stay in it a long time, you got to look after yourself. And sometimes people get very excited and feel like they're recovering quite well. It's a massive trauma on the body. And I think there is a tendency sometimes for ultra runners to bounce back far too quickly. So I'd be saying realistically, everybody's different, of course, but I'd say you'd want 3 months really before a hard 100 miler and doing it again. You might be able to do other ultras in that time span. It depends how elite you are as well, but 6 weeks, 8 weeks, it's tight. It's been tight for me. If I go to the autumn 100, I think that'll be 8 weeks. So it's tight, and I knew it was tight from doing 185 miles. But obviously, I've been doing it 10 years. So that naturally that might come down a little bit. It depends how long you've been doing it. But one of the questions, we might jump into this right now, actually, because one of the things on Instagram you put was how to prioritize your health and reduce injury. And one of the things that I would say about that is to really respect your body when you put it through hell, and I'm guilty of doing that too, of course, is to then respect that recovery the best you can, to give it the nourishment and the recovery and the rest and all the sleep, everything that it needs to get back on track to go again. But hey, I'm not a naysayer. Everyone's, free to do what they want to do. But I think I've seen as a coach, as a race director as well, and I've suffered from it personally, but I don't believe it was from my running. I think it was from my lifestyle. But you get a lot of endocrine issues in ultra running, which is just hormones shot because of how hard things like running all night are on your endocrine system. So things like thyroid issues and hormone imbalances and chronic fatigue. All these issues that you do see flaring up in ultra running, and I see, because when I work with people over years, I'm trying to keep them away from that, and potentially they've had that in the past and they're scared of that burnout now, which rightly so. So I also think, while we're on this as well, a certain degree of strength training can be in the plan. We're never going to do that much of it. That's okay as runners. But if we totally neglect any kind of resistance training, we can get in trouble, especially as we're all aging, of course, but most of us have got into ultra running later in life as well. And we lose a certain percentage of muscle mass every year as we age. So we're kind of fighting that aging process a little bit in terms of strength. So it's good to try and mitigate that a little bit with some strength. There's been a lot of studies and research looking at how brain health is massively improved from resistance training as well. So although the jury's out, so to speak, on whether strength training actually assists and aids your running performance, I don't think it's out for whether it makes you healthier. And I think we need to put our health before our training stats in many respects. So instead of just trying to go for high cumulative mileage, you might do a little less mileage, but put some strength work in there to look after your body again and respect it for the great job that it does, and keep you going for longer.
Yeah, absolutely. Helen's mentioned about struggling to get past 25 miles without an injury. She says, despite a slow and steady build-up, how do I progress this? When I've run a marathon, I take such a long time to recover after. And I know I can see some discussions in the chat about hormone and particularly menopause. And this is something that I'm personally going through at the moment. So I'm very interested in how becoming stronger and kind of taking the brakes off doing quite so much running, but incorporating more strength work is really beneficial actually to your running and, as you say, to your overall health.
Yeah, well, perimenopause and through the menopause as well, you're much more likely to lose that muscle mass again for the females. So the guys will lose strength and muscle mass as well as they age, but for the females, it's particularly tricky, and hormonally it's tricky. And I've coached a fair few females through this stage now. So some in their 40s, some in their 50s. You have to stay flexible. And again, that was one of the things you'd nicely posted out on Instagram that I would talk about. So let's talk about it now. The best way to have your plan is to set out your plan, but then see it in pencil from start to finish, really. And then see it day to day. How do you feel? There's this big thing in society and as runners that we feel if we move a session or don't execute the session that was planned for that day, then we're failing. But it's actually paradoxical. If you stay flexible and you move things around, you actually get a higher level of adherence and consistency from doing so. So it tips it on its head. When you get regimented and black and white, I've got to do this session today because it's on my plan and I said I would, despite you're feeling lousy or you didn't sleep well last night or you've got a cold. It does good, because again, ultimately, if you're flexible, you'll recover better. If you feel really good, bring your speed session forward and do it that day. If you feel bad, do your easier session. And if you can flow with your body like that, you will actually have, when you look back on your training, a more productive block of training than you would if you kept trying to force that through. So the other thing as well I like to do is on a Sunday evening is look at my week for the upcoming week and look at what sessions that I'm trying to do. And I'll be looking at my key sessions. So that could be somebody's hill intervals or speed sessions or their longer run, and try and think, when am I going to do those? What work commitments, what family commitments, what social, I've never got any social commitments, but what social commitments have you got? And then put your training around that as well. So, and again, I'm coaching people, and I have to put the sessions somewhere. So for my own sanity and their sanity, I stick to a structure from what they've told me when we first gathered in. What's the best days for these kind of workouts, and I put them on them days. But I'm always reiterating, listen, move them weekly to get those sessions in to the best of your ability, to how you feel. Otherwise, we miss out on that, listening to our body and doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So would you say that that's kind of your advice to Helen for progressing without injury?
You're lost until you know why. You've got to try and get to the bottom of, like, why does that happen? Why do I take so long to recover from a marathon distance, and why do I get injured when I can't, if I go beyond that? So you really try and find your why. Is that happening? We're always lost, as doctors are lost if they can't diagnose you, coaches are lost if they can't spot why something might be happening. So I'd be advising, dig deeper to try and find out why, and that'd be a whole case history that you'd have to look at. As there been health issues, traumas, hormonal issues, fatigue issues, what's your life like? How stressful is your life? Runners don't particularly recover all that well in today's society, not only because of pollutants or poor diets and things, but also because of stress levels. We're in a capitalist world that drives us on, to be busy and to make money and be productive and efficient and not really take holidays and times off. And it makes you busy because everybody thinks they're competing with everybody else. So that's stressful in itself. Your sleep then gets squeezed down, and sleep's an amazing tool to recovery and staying healthy and in the game a lot longer. But most driven people don't respect their sleep enough, because it obviously makes sense that they go-getters, they've often got a lot of energy and they push. But that's like inhaling and holding your breath and staying at the top of it, inhale, you would pass out. You have to exhale, you have to relax. And all these things need to be weighed into somebody's reasoning of why is this person not recovering? Well, they've maybe got children, that's stressful straight away, as lovely as they are. They might work long hours, they might work shift work. There's a myriad reasons why it might be happening. So I don't know that, but the individual can dig deeper and find out. And it's worth saying as well, there's no harm in not becoming an ultra runner. You know, I'm quite envious of, and I'm not being a naysayer, but I'm quite envious of people that do little 3-milers and are really content and happy with it, and just they don't really use Strava, and they're not really on the watch, and they just go out and run, and they do it for well-being and health. And I'm like, that's just the best reason to run ever, just because you enjoy it and do it. They don't even really do events, and that's just amazing. I think we all need to harness a little bit of that, even as we get more serious. And obviously I'm a coach helping people be serious about their recreation, but we need to stay true to that. Running's a gift, it's a blessing, it's a beautiful thing to do. And I just love the movement of it, the feeling that you get. And you got to look after yourself. And if you keep getting to a certain distance and it's not happening, and you try different avenues, I'm not saying you just quit, but if you try different avenues and it's never happening, you've maybe got to say, should I just come back? Should I just do, what's making me feel good and keeping me well? All the stuff that I've been through, I'm still open to that idea. If I keep if I really struggle in the future with like the real big distances, that's where my passion is. But I would turn away from it if it was making me really poorly, really ill, and I wasn't coming back from it. I would have to stare that in the face, and I'd drop down the distances until I found my feet again.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, that if it is continuously causing you problems, as you say, running is a gift, and being able to run any distance, there are lots of people who can't run. So yeah, being able to enjoy a bit of the sport would still be amazing to do. So yeah, thanks, Ronnie.
Should we talk about self-affirmations? Should we talk about how to stay positive? So you've got your goal. So I'm not a huge fan actually of self-affirmations for a lot of reasons. However, if you add a question to it, I think that can be really, really helpful, because if you say something that's not true and you just say it repeatedly, it doesn't ever become true. I'll give you a few examples, and that'll make more sense. But I'm doing my best, and that is all I can ask of myself. So that's a nice positive affirmation. I'm doing my best, and that's all I can ask of myself. But that might not be true, so just then saying that, if that's not true, is not going to help you. So I always like to add a couple of questions, and if it's not true, it can help it become true, and if it is true, it helps reinforce it and grow that even deeper. So I would ask, could I improve my planning to avoid life getting in the way of training? Most of us can do that a bit better. Sometimes things crop up, but could I mitigate this better through really scheduling and committing to my training sessions? So instead of just saying I'm doing my best, I'll then question that and ask, am I doing my best? And then if it's not actually true what you're saying, then you'll feel that, and then you might be able to put it in place. Another one I've got is I am healthy. That's a great self-affirmation. But again, if you're not healthy and you say I am healthy, you'll know within your gut. So what can you do about that? My health is my priority. I can only run consistently if I am well. Am I taking my recovery seriously? Do I get enough active rest, sleep, and how is my nutrition and hydration? So again, instead of just saying I am healthy, then question that, reinforce that, and try and improve that. And just one final one is I believe in my dreams. Okay, that's a great affirmation, because if you don't believe in your dreams, nobody else cares at all about them, really, is the harsh fact of that. But again, you might say, I believe in my dreams, and it might not feel entirely true. So to open that out and to deal with things better as well, I would say, when I have an injury, an illness, or a setback, what can I do to stay patient and on track as best as possible? So that's going to take a bit of belief to get through that setback. Even if I have to postpone my 100-mile vision, how do I make sure I respond well to the adversity to keep my dream alive? What I would add to that as well is, if you're saying, I believe in my dreams, and it's just not true anymore, that's okay too, to look at why. We change as people through the years, and our ideas and visions and goals get old, and it can get old with us, and they can be not what we need anymore. They're just not the right thing for us. So we could address that too. So it's not about trying to believe them and making sure we believe them. It can be sometimes opening that out and say, they're not my dreams anymore. They're old ideas. And I've mentioned this a little bit before. That happened to me when I fell off a cliff edge of health when I had the stroke. I had all these visions and all these dreams and all these ideas, and then I had a stroke. And what happens when that happens? You don't age. You don't shed those visions and dreams slowly. You look at your life all of a sudden, and you're completely different, or you're certainly different, because you've gone through that trauma, and you've got a lot hanging over your head. So you've got your old dreams still, because your dreams haven't had time to change yet. So you have to then look at them and say, which ones feel feasible, possible, realistic, good for me? There was a spell when they was all terrible for me. I've been very fortunate in my recovery that they're all back on. They're pretty much all back on, but there's still a difference in my thinking. And I'm a lucky guy. I've had things fall my way to do that. But what I was willing to do is change those visions and change those dreams, but I didn't give up on them till I tried to make them happen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's relevant for so many of us, because as we saw from that poll about, a lot of people do choose races on a whim. So whether we've had, a major life change, like having a stroke, or just the realization that, hey, I've bitten off a lot more than I can chew here, and maybe this isn't realistic for me right now. That's not to say that you could never do it, but perhaps, you need to just make some amendments and go for something that's more suitable at this particular time. Digressing slightly, Sarah asked a question previously about changing your diet in the week before a race. I think she might be talking about maybe eating a bit more carbs or something like that. Is that something that you would recommend in the lead up to an event?
Yeah, it do you no harm to eat well and have good carbs. Yeah, carb loading and that whole idea, it's got its kind of perks to it, and it's got its people saying no, don't do it. Ultimately, I wouldn't really suggest much of a change at all. I'd just be saying, in your taper in particular, you eat well, you eat what you want. Most people mentally will want to eat quite clean, because if you're having there and you're having like a sticky toffee pudding or whatever floats your boat, it's kind of like makes you feel lethargic and heavy. And it's like, who wants to feel heavy going into an important race? Nobody. So you don't carb up on sugar, but you try and eat well, you try and eat wholesome, and carbs have got to be in there. Obviously, so people will oppose that as well, though, and say, I run off fat, so I starve myself with carbs before a race. I mean, it's not going to work for many people. So I'd say smile and nod nicely at the people that recommend that you do that. Like, it might work for them, that's okay. But for most people, eat well, eat wholesome, eat plenty of carbs. So yeah, definitely a good idea. You're trying to go into your race to peak. You're trying to go in there with a lot of energy. You don't want to be worried about weight, and you certainly don't want to be running a race to lose weight. So you want to be fueling and eating as much as you can and keeping your sugars high during that event as well. But again, there'll be the people that don't eat, and that works for them. That's fine. I'm talking in general for most individuals. You're going to have to fuel, and you're going to have to fuel well.
Yeah. Thank you. Just to say, I'm not sure if Ronnie's freezing a little bit for anybody else or just me, but hopefully you can all still hear him okay. Lisa would like to know, what is a typical training week like for you? What do you do? Because we know you're a coach, so you're obviously giving training plans to other people, but what do you do in a typical week?
Yeah, well, obviously depends what I'm doing. I didn't do much after King Arthur's died for a few weeks there. It mostly was laid on a bed trying to elevate my leg and seeing everybody else going out running. But yeah, there's been a lot about polarized training of late and training slow, and I'm certainly a believer in that. I think about 80% of your training would be quite easy, and then you'd polarize that with majority with harder workouts. So people may know of the 80-20. There's the maffetone as well, but that creates problems for some runners. What I do is a common, like a hybrid approach. So I'll train a lot really easy endurance, keeping my effort level down, but then I will have speed interval sessions which grow into tempo runs. And I'll also have hill reps as well, which will progress in the number of hill reps. And I'll try and do, at least when I'm training properly, there'll be 1 to 2 harder sessions and the rest easy. Again, this is of course how I coach, but it will be dependent on the individual and of course what they're training for. I don't really do back-to-backs as such, because throughout all my understanding and of going and doing a sports science degree in the early days, and the way the body responds to stress, it's never made sense to me to really stress the body and then not let it recover on the next day. So however, you can go again and you can have a fairly big second day, but I tend to like that to be a lot easier. And if for people going super long or intending to hike a lot on their event, that's a great thing to do, is run, hike, and get skillful at that interchanging of the ability to run and hike, especially on that second day. There's this whole thing of, run on tired legs and beat yourself up and it'll harden you mentally and all this. It kind of just beats you down, and then you don't really recover from it. It's an old school methodology for ultras. A lot of people still believe it. A lot of people glean confidence from it, and I understand that. But ultimately, I'd be saying be very cautious of the traditional back-to-back. So keeping the quality mostly easy, keep a bit of speed, keep a bit of hill reps in there, whether it's just 1 hard session or 2, depending how you recover, and cranking your miles up, if you can. But again, that cumulative mileage is not the most important thing. The most important thing for everybody listening right now is consistency. Consistency is the key, and the key ingredient that will get you to the best you can be. When you persist at something, and if you look after yourself and you recover well and you're healthy and you get your sleep and you eat well and you get your schedule right and you persist and you day in and your day out going for it, you will hit your best. Nobody ever hit their best having big spells and breaks off running. When I'm talking about allowing your body to recover, I'm not talking about sitting on the sofa. It's important to recognize that. I'm just saying you rein it in and then you get back building again. Double day runs are a great way to lift your mileage as well. So potentially, let's say if you ran 7 in the morning and you could go out for another 4 miles in the evening, that's a great way. That second run would be super easy, but it just boosts your mileage. I do a lot of that when I'm coming up to something that's important to me in a big race. I will start running twice a day. So I might run 12 times in a week. With some of those double days, and I just stay away from, for me personally, works for some people to do like 25 miles and 30 miles quite regularly. It doesn't for me. I stay around the 20-mile mark, and just push it to that and keep good quality, and don't really go beyond that. But obviously I might do an event like a 50-miler to prep me about a few weeks before 100 or something. But again, you've got to get that timing right, that it doesn't just deplete you for your main event. And I see that happen a lot. I don't know if that paints a little bit of a picture of what I do, but I'm super cautious to like paint it out exactly and people to follow that, because it wouldn't be right for that individual. But consistency, stay within your reach of what you can do, and keep some quality, potentially that little bit of resistance training as well, maybe once, maybe twice a week, depending on what you can do. Doesn't have to be a gym, could just be little kettlebells or something in your back garden, but putting some strain through your body, because endurance takes a lot out of you. You need to put something back now and again. The reductionist coaches out there that just say run, and you'll get better at running, I think they're off their heads. I just don't think it really is going to work for most people. It might work for the elites, but they're genetically gifted. But to telling somebody to not look after their body in terms of corrective exercise or posturally, to me is insane, because that's what you're running with. So yeah, if you can look after that as well and fit that in your plan, that works better. And of course, that sometimes just brings your mileage down a little bit. And I don't know if it's Strava. I'm not on Strava. I'm not against Strava, but I don't know if it's the fact that people are public with their stats. But there's this whole thing of trying to hit high mileage and or speed and pace, and that's probably pushing people up above the easy pace into moderate. So that's the biggest common training error, I would say, is that most people are training moderate when they should be easy. So because again, maybe that's number on watches, but you should just be feeling good, and you should just be consistent in what you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. I know a few times I've put my watch, I've moved it off of the pace so I can't see the pace, but it's just using like heart rate zones to tell me what is easy. And easy really is, I mean, because I run super slow, but easy is so slow for me. So if I were to actually see that pace on my watch, I would think, well, why am I running so slow? This is ridiculous. But I think, as you say, a lot of people are running their easy runs far too hard. So they're not gaining that benefit that easy running can give you.
You'll get away with it. It's worth mentioning, you'll get away with it if you're not running much. You're probably better running moderate, because you're going to work a bit harder. You've still got the time to recover. So I'm talking about people that do maybe 60, 70, 80 miles per week here. That if they're running in moderate a lot, they won't elicit the gain because you don't recover. But if you're running 15 miles per week, you'll get away with it, because you're going to recover. And it's something to be mindful of. Most ultra runners will get their weekly mileage volume up, and then if they're running too much at a harder pace, then they'll start to suffer. I mean, should we talk about how to manage your doubts? Because we wasn't talking about
this.
Definitely. Training, as much as I'm willing to talk about it, it's an absolute minefield, because it's all down to the individual and what they're doing. Hopefully I've given some key ideas there, but we'd be here till tomorrow.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's massive, it's a different topic. Let's talk about doubts and how you manage those, because I know that's a lot of people struggle with that confidence or how to manage that, and then we'll see where we're at. In essence, again, it does fit to what we're talking about, because for me, the best way to manage your doubts is to train well. Physically, if you physically train your body well, mentally, I think your doubts will decrease. But it's cyclical. It's a circle. If you train your body well, mentally you'll feel stronger, and then if mentally you feel stronger, then physically you can push your body harder, and it just feeds in a loop, and you get deeper and deeper in that, and you kind of get callous to it over the years. But as people are maybe trying to work on their mind separate to the body, which yes, you can do, and you can work through trauma in that kind of respect and things. But in terms of confidence for your ultra, if you've trained really well and you've given your best through your sessions in your preparation, then your doubt should be less. I'm not saying it will be eradicated, but it would be less. So you train your body to train your mind. Once you've trained your mind, your body will follow, and it'll just keep going like that. And that's why the guys that have stayed in the game a long time and the girls that have stayed in the game a long time have this knack of finishing things, because they've built up the experience. When the doubts come during an event, that's slightly different. I've talked about it before. Whatever you push away will fight you more so. So if you start feeling like you can't finish the ultra, or you're just not cut out for this, we talked, I think, briefly about Robin Hood before. When it drops dark and it gets quite fresh, and it was quite fresh this year, we get no end of people drop out. It makes perfect sense. You've gone through all the day, and then the temperature starts to drop and it's dark, and it gets a little bit grim. So that's exactly when the doubts are going to start to play of how far you've got to go. I'm now uncomfortable. The sun's gone in and this is hard now. And some people feel, I don't know if they panic, but they feel like they're not in the place they should be to be able to overcome that obstacle. For some, I think they could get through it. Others get legitimate DNFs. They just can't move. They just can't carry on. And there's nothing wrong with failing, by the way. I just think for some people, they could get through it. They're physically capable and they could get through, but their doubts get a hold of them. I've always said it, when your doubts come like that, you need to open out to them, and you need to just listen to them, make friends with them, smile with them, give them funny voices and all the rest of it. When you really hug and give them a kiss if you want, but when you really get involved with your doubts like that, you realize you're superior to them. Because if you're the guy listening to them, you're bigger than the doubts. When you let the doubts just run right over you and you're lost in them, and what they're telling you, you believe that's who you are, you're completely lost. So when you're the guy watching the doubts and playing with them, you're in full control. You're in a place there where you can make a decision. And as well, if you push your doubts away, you don't hear what they're saying, and they might actually be telling you something really helpful. Like they might be telling you that you're really cold, which is a great thing to understand and then do something about. But you can't do that if you just try and switch off from them. So by embracing them and trying to learn from them, you can use them and use that to drive you. And the right decision might be to drop out at that point. But the point is what I'm getting to is that you make that decision, not your doubts. Because if it's your doubts, just knee-jerk making you do something. But that takes time. That can be learned in daily life, but it can also be learned on repetitive ultras. And I think that experience of people being in that position when their back's against the wall and keep coming out of it to finish stuff, they learn, when I get in that position now and it still happens, your doubts and your fears and thinking you can't do it still always come your way. But it's just a little bit like, here we go again type thing. And it just has less power over you and it's just more fun. But I think, train well. The other thing is the pragmatic things, read the rules of the event, get organized, get your kit, know your logistics, know all your plans, talk to your pacers, talk to your crew, make sure that everything's in order. That reduces your anxiety. And therefore your doubt as well. Just be super organized. If you've been to Wrecked a route, that'll improve your confidence as well. So many little things you can do rather than just be worried about it.
Yeah. Graham's actually just shared, embrace the suck. Fight those mental demons head on. I find talking to myself in the third person snaps me out of it. I'll show those doubts. That's pretty good advice. We've had another person who's asked how do you remain positive when you're returning to running after an extended period of injury?
Yeah, it's a great question. Obviously, after I had my stroke, I had to learn to run again. And that was quite difficult. Okay, I didn't have to learn to run again. It just didn't feel like me. So when I ran, it was like being a complete beginner again. And then I had to get the feeling back. Anyone with any brain injury or anything severe like that knows how it's quite easy to get very frustrated with it. So I can talk from personal experience on this. The setback of being quite where you wanted to be, having a long injury and coming back. And it doesn't have to have been severe, of course. You've got to look at where you are now. not where you was. There's too much comparison in today's society with other people, but we do it with ourselves individually from who we were. It could be that we're looking at our younger self or our fitter self, whatever it might have been. But we have to come to accept where we are today, right now. And then from that place, once you accept it, and I mean, you've got to accept it, not pretend you accept it, then you can start to build out from it. There seems to be a real confusion with what acceptance is. People think acceptance is giving up. Acceptance is not giving up. It's being a realist with what your current circumstances are. And once you can see that and you're brave enough to acknowledge that, you then can see the stepping stones of how you prize yourself out of it. So it's actually completely opposite from giving up. If you keep looking back, that's okay objectively. What would I like to get back to? What am I capable of? But of course, it depends what's been wrong with you, whether it's been something like cancer or a tumor or, stroke or a heart attack, or is it just, I hurt my calf? So it depends on the level of the trauma as well, whether you can be that person again. These questions hang over my head a little bit, of course, but they accept where you are in the now. To not accept that is madness, because it's happened and it's actually where you are. But as people, we're not logical and we push things away. We're not always good at facing them. To put that into perspective, and I totally understand why as well, because it can be painful to do that, especially if you're nowhere near you want to be. A month after my stroke, I went to a somatics class, which some people know of it, but many won't. But somatics is kind of a movement control. You could see it as a very light form of yoga, but you connect to your body. And I remember that was the first time I realized how bad my left side was. And I also remember emotionally it hitting me of how bad I felt and how much damage had been done to my body. And I'm in a room and I'm in a class full of a few other people. And, I don't mind admitting I nearly cried. Now, I've been a month post-stroke and thinking I'm doing all right. But the moment I stopped to connect to my body, I understood the journey I had and how bad that I felt. So I completely understand sometimes when people don't accept where they are because they won't even look at it. But we need to look at it then to understand, right, I need to do X, Y, and Z to come out of it. Once you do that, you're fully focused on your goals for now, and you'll see that you can measure that progress, get your SMART goals and measure them and keep on top of them that way. I wasn't, and I still don't really look back other than objectively, but emotionally, you must try and avoid that. And just think how I recently put a little post out about that, actually, instead of asking the question, how far on would I be now if I'd have not been injured or if I'd have not had that trauma, and ask the question, how good can I be now it's happened? And it totally flips that question to empower you rather than disempower you. So that's what I'd be saying to somebody coming back from injury: accept what's happened, accept where you are, and put the blocks in today to get better.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, is just, trying to, put a spin on it so that you're looking at it more positively instead of thinking of, I was this and I can't do that. I can do this and I will do this. I'm going to change.
It's always the quality of your questions. It's like always the quality of your questions. If you ask a bad question, you'll get a bad answer. So if you're asking like, I used to run so fast, or why can't I do that now? You're going to get a frustrated answer. If you ask, what can I do now? It's just a much more empowering question. You'll get a better answer. So we're not always great, myself included, at asking quality questions. But if you ask great questions, you get much better quality answers, and then you can move on from that.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to change the subject a little bit because we've got lots of questions in the Q&A. One from Helen. She says, once I start walking on a long run, I can't seem to get running again. Even if I can, it's like my legs say no. What are your tips for getting past this?
Yeah, you make it as a session. So you'd go out and you'd run, walk. So, I'm not talking to a bleep or exactly calculated here, but if you was going to run 10 miles, you could say run the first mile, then walk maybe half a mile and then run again. So you do it early rather than it being at the point where you've walked because you're fatigued and then you can't run again. So some people really struggle with the movement differentiation between walking and running. And this is why I love that session where you are running and then dripping hiking in, or vice versa, you're hiking, dripping running in, because some people will need a lot more of that to get that interchangeability between the two. It won't necessarily happen. So it depends what people are training for. If you get quite an elite runner for a 100-miler, then I don't give them hiking. That just makes sense because they're not going to hike really, unless it's just for a rest or just to use different muscles occasionally. But for someone who's going to be just looking to creep in at 29 hours, hiking has to feature in their plan because they're going to be walking a lot of it. So doing it from the offset and learning to run and walk from fresh is a great way to start enhancing that. And most people know the old adage of, walk before you need to. And there is a bit of that going off as well. But you should be, the stuff I love, the long distance stuff, we have to hike all the time, then run in the gaps, and then you carry that until you might not be able to run anymore. That's why it's not for everybody, because they get too frustrated. But it is the ability to run after walking potentially for hours and then get running again. The guys in the mountains do that really well as well. They'll hike the steep climbs fast, but they'll hike them and then they'll be able to run the downhills really quickly. They've trained to do that. It might not come all that naturally. So yeah, do it as a session and try and improve it as a skill base, because it's a coordination thing as well, not just a fatigue thing.
Yeah, and we talk about this in the 100-miler pack about the importance of doing walking training as part of your overall training for the ultra. Karen is asking about speed work. How important is speed work for ultras? She says she struggles to cope with short, sharp efforts. And so she has to adapt around those to be able to do longer runs at the weekend and races.
Yeah, it is a way. She's doing the right thing by, if you can't really get the speed, you probably got to lean to go longer and get more volume and lean towards that. The problem with omitting speed and never doing speed is that you'll lose a certain type of strength and athleticism. And this is the big criticism with kind of the maffetone, is that people misinterpret what it's saying, or the 80-20. People misinterpret it and think, well, if the 80% is 80%, that's the most important element, and they end up doing 100% of it because the speed's hard or it causes injury. But mostly just because it's hard. So they think it can't be that important because it's only 20%. So they drop it. Or they barely do it and they do like a 95.5, or they do 100% easy and slow. You lose your athleticism and you get slower. And the amount of people that I've had come to me for coaching and said, I've tried this way of training, I just got slower. I maybe don't jump on it at first, but as the relationship develops, I say, when you did try it before, though, did you do speed as well? No, I did do all easy. It's like, yeah, that is not actually what you told me. That protocol is not that. It does have some hard in it as well. And people seem to just turn away from that because the mind's like, I don't want to run speed today. Other people potentially can't. I totally accept that. They might have bad Achilles injuries or calf injuries. And so they might have to go more towards the volume. So I'd say that's the right thing to do. But there is an in-between. It doesn't have to just be short and sharp. A great run is more of kind of a progression run where you start off easier and then build up the pace through the gears once you are, getting thoroughly warm. That is one way to get a bit of a better leg turnover and some speed work and push your pace a little bit towards the end of the session without the real big risk of an injury. So things like progression runs are worth looking at. Tempo runs are safer as well because they're for a longer duration and won't be kind of, a 10 out of a 10. They might be, an 8 out of a 10 effort. So there are ways to do it. Or also as well, the big problem with never doing speed is you never thoroughly tax your aerobic system or your anaerobic system. If you don't ever tax your anaerobic system, when you climb a mountain or something, depending on where your race is, you go anaerobic and you've not trained to ever do it. So you'll feel sick, you'll have a sugar crash, you'll find it hard to recover from it because unless you've been going to the mountains and hiking hard and doing these things, you've not been going anaerobic, without oxygen. But you'll also have a lower cap aerobically. So VO2 max is basically the maximum amount of oxygen that you can use. If you always run easy and slow, you've got a lower level. If your VO2 max is higher, your aerobic level in theory is higher. So what that means is you can run easy at a better pace if you've got a higher VO2. And VO2 is maximal work. So that is your real hard interval sessions that push that ceiling up. I've seen this in a lot of runners that because they've neglected that harder session type work, they're out of breath or to go in like their lactate threshold and going anaerobic at a fairly moderate pace when you'd expect that to be higher for that experienced athlete. And if they need to push their ceiling up with their VO2 max and their aerobic, should be higher. So there's that problem as well. And that's why ultra runners should do speed and intervals because their easy pace will be higher because of it. And that's often just totally missed because they're looking at it directly. Well, I don't run that pace on the ultra, so I've not got to do it. Yeah, well, it's for the energy systems why you would do that.
Yeah, I suppose the same is true for hills as well. So if you're running a flat race, running hills is still important to try to push that.
Yeah, exactly. But the great thing is, if you've got injuries and you've got problems, you can raise your VO2 max on a rower, on a spin bike, on hiking big inclines. Your energy system, of course, to be specific, it's great to be able to do it via running. But if you can't do it, it doesn't necessarily mean you can't raise your VO2 max. You can. Like get on a rower and beast yourself in short intervals, like 200-meter spurts on a rower, and really hurt yourself on it, and you will elevate your VO2 max. And I would guarantee almost that you'll get some transfer then in your running. Like when you're easier running, you'll find that your pace is a bit better because you've raised your ceiling.
Excellent. As I'm sure you can imagine, we have had lots of questions about training. I'm just going to ask two more that I'll combine together, which are, bear with me. Viv wants to know how long your longest run should be before a 100-miler and when should you do it? And then tying into that, what's the average mileage per week you should aim for if you're training for a 100-miler?
Yeah, the latter question I like more because it plays into this consistency theory, of that cumulative effect of your training. The first question of how long your longer run should be really worries me because running for marathons, that the longer run has become like a real focus of that long run really matters for how well you're going to do it your marathon. In ultras it just doesn't really work that way, and people still put loads of emphasis on that long run, how long it is and what distance that should be and maybe how often that you do it. You don't need, but it depends on if you do any events. I would recommend your events take you over that threshold of the 20-25 mile mark. But in your training, I would see it as very rare that you would want to go over the sort of 20-mile mark on a longer run. But I understand why somebody might want to, for confidence, of course, to know that they can go a lot further. But that is why ideally, and I've talked about why you don't really need prerequisites for 100, but that wasn't to say I didn't advise it. It's probably better to work through the ranks of a 50k or a 50-mile first, to have done that and have done that in the build up. And that could be, enough time where you can do that breakthrough workout, as in breakthrough race for 50 mile, but then have a little bit of time to recover, get back going again and taper for your main event. For some, that'd be 8 weeks. For some, that might be 6. Some of the elites do it 2 weeks before because they bounce back so fast and then they're ready to go with it. Mileage wise, per week, around 50 to 60 miles per week is what your average Joe doing a 100-miler I've seen does really well off. But that, again, if they've got more time and they can recover, then they can push that to anything they really want to, 70, 80, 90. Some guys will do 100+ mile weeks, but it's quite rare. You can run 100 miles really well off about 50 miles per week, and I've seen that a lot. But again, it is ideal if you can do a bit more, but that will depend on whether you can recover from it. And if you start doing 70 miles per week and you're just fatigued, tired, and all your niggles flare, you just have to come back down again. But you don't make your mileage up from your longer runs. You make it up from your consistency of, maybe a lot of 10 milers. And then, like I said, maybe double day running, 4 or 5 mile in the evening, pick it up that way and keep your quality. When you start getting to mileage figures, that's when the long run and that mileage figure for the week start to get dangerous, because ultra runners like bank their runs, busy through the week working or whatever. Right, I'm going to do 50 miles on the weekend because I want to hit an 80-mile week. It's disastrous because it's too much trauma on the body and you don't really recover. You're just hitting high trauma, dropping down, high trauma, dropping down, instead of a stepping stone process from the consistency.
Yeah, thank you. Sarah wants to know what your thoughts are on cross training and how would you fit that in to a typical week of training?
Depends on cross training, what it is you want to do. If you love doing other sports, then that kind of naturally happens, and no coach kind of curbs that. But they might advise when you're getting closer to your event, you might just have to run a bit more, and that's what deters some ultra runners from staying in it, because they love paddle boarding and climbing and all the rest of it, and you can't really fit all that in when you're getting more serious about your running. You want to be predominantly running. If it's more endurance cross training, I don't really see it as all that helpful unless you're injured for your running, because it's endurance again, and you're getting your endurance from your running. So then if you go on like long swims and long cycle rides, it can become too much. But if you're sprinting, doing hard swims, that can work more towards those intervals I was talking about and raising that athleticism. So it depends what the person wants to cross train on, and for how long. But again, resistance work and corrective exercises is probably the ideal thing to do. How much transfer there is to performance is probably, it's not all that great. If a climber, I'm stronger because I'm climbing, so then I run better because I'm stronger. It might be more a mental process than's actually true, but I would agree with them by being healthy and having that strength. It's probably helping them keep running for longer, let's say. But whether it actually makes them a faster runner would be, the jury would be out on that one. So your cross training doesn't want to fatigue you for your running. If it is on a regular basis, then it's too much. Again, depending how serious you are for training for that 100 or whatever it is you're doing. And that's why, again, some people stop it. So your cross training needs to accompany your running. And if you're continually turning up tired for your running, your cross training is too heavy. So you fit it in any which way, really. Try and place it in and around the key workouts, but you still got to recover. And I'd say you don't do too much of it.
Yeah, I think that's really good. Thank you for that. We've run slightly over time. So I just wondered if you had any, I know I mentioned tips for keeping your motivation high. If you had a parting thought here of what advice could you give to people to, who they've set themselves that 100-mile goal, one little bit of advice to get them to that finish line, what would you say?
I would say motivation comes and goes. Motivation is a feeling, and you don't always feel motivated. But drive, purpose, and meaning are much more robust. If you imagine this like a cake, bake your cake off purpose and drive and meaning, and the top peripheral layer of that is your topping, it's your icing, that's motivation. When you can do things when you don't feel motivated is when you actually really start to succeed in your training. I don't think anyone who trains a lot always feels motivated or always enjoys it or always wants to do it. That's what training is. That's the difference from randomly exercising for fun. Right? If you don't want to do it, you don't do it. But when you're training, you still try and adhere and you still try and put it in, even though you're not really feeling it. You've got to listen to your body, like I said, but you still try and make it happen if you will. So you work on the meaning that it has to you, and why do you want to do it, and look at all those reasons of why, and you build on those. They feed into motivation, but trying to feed motivation without meaning beneath it just doesn't really work, and there's too much emphasis placed on motivation. Motivation is at the end of the line. It's the stuff behind that fuels motivation. But in terms of what you do for your motivation at a peripheral level, you could run with friends, you could go on social runs, you could join a gym. That might help some people to do the strength work and things like this. You could listen to music, you could go on different routes, you could listen to audio books. There's many different ways that you might be able to incentivize your training. You could set like a park run PB, or try and break a park run PB, set some little goals to reinstill some enthusiasm for your running. Events, of course, perk up motivation. That's why they're important. And it can be, when we had COVID and we had no events, it was sometimes difficult for runners to be motivated. But again, some didn't struggle with it because I think they had more purpose in their running than just events. And that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's really good. And speaking of events, I think that leads nicely into Ronnie doesn't just do running coaching. He also organizes some fantastic events. And you do have one coming up in a few weeks, which is the shortest race that you organize. It's only a 10-miler. So for all you ultra runners out there, you should find that a walk in the park, really.
Yeah, the Dukeries 10, really love that race, because a lot of people, some people indeed, have come and done that as their first trail running event, first off. So they've always run on road or not really done events, and they've come and done that as their first trail event, which, you know, I'm pretty proud of. And then that's got them into the whole idea of other distances, and they've come back and done the Dukeries 30 or Dukeries 40, and then some of them have then gone on to do the Robin Hood 100. So that it's important that we have good quality stepping stone, lower distance trail events. We're inundated with events at the minute, but like to have good trail races that are approachable to people is really important to keep fueling the sport and allowing people onto the ladder. And of course, we have a lot of people that only stay at that distance. And interestingly as well, we tend to get a much higher ratio of females than males on that 10-miler as well. So that's another fantastic reason to keep that race going, to increase female participation in trail running, because that still needs to grow into ultra running. It's not going to grow into ultra running if we drop all the shorter distance stuff. Now, there's some ultra companies obviously focus on ultras. I've always tried to keep that first run of the ladder on there. It's on in a few weeks. Entries are still open. In total truth, our numbers are way down to what they used to be pre-COVID. And for me to keep that race on and be able to keep it on, which I think is vital, I need more entries. So if you're free on the 22nd of October and fancy, full disclosure, it's 10.8 miles, but we'd love to see you there. In Nottinghamshire area, it's at Walesby.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ronnie. That has been super this evening. I hope everybody's enjoyed it, and thank you all for tuning in. Like I said, if you've not had a look at the 100-mile pack, It's on our website under help and how to run 100 miles, and module 3 is coming your way very, very soon. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your evening. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, guys.